Welcome to Golf and the Good Life, your guide to golf travel across the pond. I'm DJ Jones, joined as always by my friend and colleague Connor Evers. Connor, great to be back with you. We are sort of coming down from a high following the Open Championship. It's always the busiest week of the year for us in terms of interest for overseas golf travel, even though it also means some pretty early mornings for us. But what is the latest at HMB HQ?
Wow, it was a fun week watching the Open, DJ. It was a great win by Brian Harmon. We'll talk a little bit more about the Open specifically, but yeah, I mean, we had actually a group of mine over and watched the Open, watched the practice round, and it was actually attending the Open as well. But yeah, we're about halfway through actually a little bit more halfway through the travel season here in 2023. We did receive, like I said, a lot of inquiries for trips to England. The media did a great job. Obviously, we did a fantastic job, and everyone just kind of boasted that England's Gulf Coast area. So it's going to be a great area going forward, especially with Birkdale being there in a few years for the Open as well. But all's good here, DJ.
Well, look forward to talking a little about the Open. But before we get there, I've got to give a quick tip of the cap to a group of ours from Ridgely Country Club who are currently in Southwest Ireland. 16 guys look like they're having an absolute blast. Thanks for all of your posts on Instagram. I think by the time this airs, you're probably home already, but wanted to give a quick shout out to them as it looks like they're having a great time. But today's episode is a little different. We're going to talk a little about the Open, but we're not going to dwell too much on the competition side of things. There are plenty of places to go get your hot takes on that topic, but we have to kind of start with Brian Harmon, right? I mean, the guy just absolutely dismantled the field and Royal Liverpool in general.
I've said it. I don't know if I'm right in it, but maybe a hot take too, DJ. But I mean, it was Tiger-esque. You might not think of it, but like he really put his head down. I mean, as you probably saw and read, I mean, he got heckled a little bit. No one really wanted the underdog to win. The locals were rooting for Tommy to win, most of them. But until he hit his bunker shot on 18 out onto the green, I mean, that was the really only time he showed any type of emotion. I mean, he put his head down, got to work, and played 72 fantastic holes of golf.
Yeah, I mean, it was absolutely textbook. The guy made 58 out of 59 putts from within 10
Yeah.
feet. And you mentioned the bunkers. He hit it in two of them all week.
Yeah.
And one of them was that throwaway shot on the 72nd hole when he's leading by 6 shots. But have to take the cap off to him. He just followed the game plan that was needed to be successful at Royal Liverpool. There was a lot of criticism on day one of the bunkers and that, guys were ending up against the lip and so forth. And I'm sorry, I have zero sympathy for that situation because there's a very simple solution here. You just don't hit them in them.
Correct.
The
Correct.
170 to 1 shot hit him in 2 all week. That's links golf. Sorry,
Yep.
not sorry. And that it's just one example of, the course as a whole, just fantastic. I mean, hat tip to James Bledge and the rest of the team. Just a phenomenal job, especially come Sunday when the weather turned and things got really, kind of sideways. The place really shined. And, it had been 9 years since the Open was there. So my memories are definitely not fresh of the links and so forth, even though I'd been there in between. Curious, what were your impressions of the course?
Oh, it was really good. I think it standing a great test, and I think players seemed like they enjoyed it. I know there was still some question marks on the new 17th, and we may get into that. But I mean, it was great. Some people hate internal OB. I love it. I think it's so different. If you don't want it, stay in the States and play golf here because you don't really get it too often here. So I love it. I love it. It creates a new, different challenge, and you got to play the angles of the holes and what have you. But I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I know across the pond, like we've said, weather's been good, but it's been really sunny, and they've also received a lot of rain. So the course was not as baked out as maybe you've watched the past videos of Rory or Tiger winning there. So the course looked from a present standpoint completely different. But I thought it played really, really well. And, even in Brian Harmon's, speech afterwards, I mean, he had a really good testament to the greenskeepers and what have you. Really enjoyed the course. Obviously, you're going to say that if you're the winner, but I mean, from a lot of players, they thought the same thing. So but it was really good, and looking forward to, again, Royal Birkdale in the future, and then another one at Hoylake in the future as well. So I think it fared really well.
I'm watching it from the standpoint of how's a 10 handicapper
Mm,
going to play this hole? Thinking about, our travelers who are going over, and, it's great to see, how the pros play it, but the areas around the greens and the runoffs and so forth
yeah.
would give the average golfer so many choices, putt it, hit a bump and run, take your chances with a sand wedge, whatever you want to do. And I found that really intriguing. I did not remember that from the past open, how many
Mhm.
or, just how much variety there was. We talked about the bunkers, and yeah, you just have to stay out of them. There's really no other, solution. But the internal OB, every time the opens at Hoylake, we hear the same thing. And I'm gonna get just as fired up over that as I did the bunkers because again, everybody's playing the same course. This is just the course. This is the hand you're dealt. On number 3 and on number 18, there is internal OB. Just stay out of it.
Yeah.
And, it's that simple. And I think like you said, I find it intriguing. I think it takes 2 holes that otherwise would be just so-so holes, especially number
Mhm.
3, which happens to be number 1 for the members. So for those of you who are planning a trip in the future, that opening hole with OB all the way flanking the right-hand side is pretty intimidating. But if you take it away, it's just a bomb a drive over the corner and
Right.
flick a wedge onto the green. But I think it was on day 1, they had the pin tucked all the way on the right-hand
Mhm.
side. It was like 5 paces from the white stake. The guys were making a mess of those 2 holes in some cases, and tee to green, I thought it was great, but, you touched on it briefly, the new 17th.
Mhm.
What did you think?
DJ, I thoroughly enjoyed the 17th, to be honest. I mean, I know some of the players did it and thought otherwise, but Golf Digest did a really good video, and it really showed the 17th hole from the tee box. And from if you're a player actually standing on the teeing area and seeing the green, it's almost a blind shot. You can't really see the putting surface. So if you hit your shot up there, I mean, the players are really relying on the crowd. Oddly, it kind of reminds me of the par threes at Muirfield, because they're slightly elevated. You can see some of the putting surfaces, but I mean, it's 134 yards.
Right.
Get your pitching wedge out, hit it on, put a good shot on it, and crack on from there. So, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't. What about you, DJ?
I can understand everybody had an opinion on this hole, and I get where some of them were coming from that it didn't necessarily fit with the rest of the
Mm,
course. It is a little jarring to me, from an architecture standpoint, the big sand scrapes. It did feel like there was this weird transition sort of thing.
mhm,
But it's like you said, it's 130 yards, just hit the shot. I think the hole accomplished what they wanted. It added some intrigue for those of us watching at home at the end of the round, and it added some stress at the end of the round to the players who were out there on the course. Unfortunately, it just was a moot point because Brian Harmon was, leading by 25 shots or whatever it was. There have been some articles that have been written that the club is going to redesign the hole, and I understand again where that's coming from because look, the Open's probably not going to be back for 8, 9, 10 years, maybe longer. And Royal Liverpool has a membership that they have to serve. And it sounds like the hole is potentially causing some challenges in terms of pace of play,
mhm.
taking forever to play that hole. And so there's some tweaks that they can perhaps make that will strike a balance. But you're just never going to convince me that a par 3 that played away from the water, as the old hole used to, which was the
Mm,
old 15th hole, I'm just never gonna be convinced that that is somehow preferable to a par 3 that plays toward the water. And, the common criticism was, "Well, they just did it for the photos and make show off the course." Yeah, you know what? They did. This is business. And what a marketing tool to show off the course and the views and so forth because it's a place that doesn't have a lot of that, doesn't
Mhm.
have the big sweeping jaw dropping views and the monstrous dunes. So that's a long way of saying I liked it. I think it does need potentially some changes from a member and visitor play standpoint, but I hope they keep it because it did what it was supposed to do, and it will be curious, how it fares in future opens as well. But the other thing that was great to see, and we talked about it on the last episode, was that Hoy Lake is so much more than just the course. The membership at Hoy Lake is just so warm and inviting, and I think that nothing illustrated that better than that video on Instagram of Matty Jordan walking back in, and being greeted by his fellow members.
Yeah, it was really cool. I mean, what a story! I believe he was the first game off on Thursday morning, and then finished. I mean, what a cool story to be a member there, and be able to play obviously very well. Definitely had the the local knowledge compared to even the best players in the world that were playing. Be able to come into the clubhouse afterwards and be congratulated from all the membership, probably the gents that you play golf with on a normal basis. I mean, that's out of a dream for sure.
Yeah, and from a travel standpoint as well, I really thought that the coverage did a great job of showcasing the area,
Hmm.
Liverpool as a whole, and the history that's there. We talked a lot about it, and again in our last episode, but overall, everyone did a great job. I think that it was a successful open. I'm pretty sure that it was the second most attended in history, or that they had sold 260,000 tickets. That's second only to last year at St. Andrews, which where they sold 290. So it'll be interesting to see if Royal Liverpool, if and when it gets the Open again, this time right after the tournament, you can kind of always feel when where the interest shifts because that's when we start getting the emails and the calls and so forth of where are the next opens. So that's part 2 of this episode. We're going to talk a little about where the claret jug goes from here. And first up next year, the 152nd happens to be at Royal Troon. Connor, you were just there a few months ago. Tell us your thoughts and what we can look forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my favorite part also, DJ, of the Open is when play is concluded. The winner, champion golf of the year, is doing interviews, and then the scoreboard at the end, it says congratulations, X winner, see you at X course, next year. And when I saw Troon, I'm like, let's go. I can't wait, for the next one too, even though it's a year out. But I think it's one of my favorite parts, like top five favorite parts of the Open. But um, Roll Troon. So it will be held next year in 2024. It was last held in 2016. And so, this was a fantastic open between Mickelson and Stenson coming down to the final wire there. They call it the duel at Troon. Henrik Stenson shot 63 in the last round, one of the best rounds of golf I have ever watched on TV. And he actually does hold the lowest 72 hole score in an open in history. So it is home of the postage stamp golf hole. It's the 8th hole at Royal Troon. When I played it, you just try to hit the green. There really isn't too many places to miss. I missed way up left in the heather and chipped on and made bogey, so it was a good bogey. But if you're in the clubhouse in the golf shop after or before your round, they actually have postage stamp ball markers. It looks like a postage stamp that we have in the States. I bought one. I think it was 20 pounds, and it was the best 20 pounds I've ever spent. So it is the coolest thing. It has the whole 8, has how many yards it is, and the top. It is the coolest thing. So look out for that. That's one of my prized possessions from Troon. The other kind of marquee hole there is the 11th, which is called Railway. Railway is to the right there. It's a very, very difficult hole. So if you've got the slices or the balls moving left to right, if you're a right-handed player, just look out for the hole. Try to get in the fairway. It really reminds me of Prestwick, the first hole, because Railway is
Mhm.
right to the right. Even if you're hitting your second shot into the hole, it's right up there to the hole. So just be careful. And the other kind of historical factor of Troon is Mr. Arnold Palmer won his second back-to-back opens here at Royal Troon. So it's got a plethora of history. The women's AIG was there, if I remember correctly, a couple of years ago. And Royal Troon again is on the west coast of Scotland, and I'm sure DJ and I will do a eventual podcast and kind of deep dive into the different areas. But it pairs well with Turnberry. There's two golf courses there, the Ailsa course as well as King Robert the Bruce, Prestwick, Western Gales, Dundonald Links. There's a few other golf courses within this area that you could have a great trip. And to be honest with you, I mean, there's still great availability on this the west coast of Scotland for next year. Royal Troon is a little different, obviously, with the Open there. They're essentially very much sold out for next year. They do have some availability left, but it's very much in the off-peak seasons, and it's groups that are going to be smaller than 4. So they do have some availability still left. You can take a helicopter and go out to Machrihanish, or you could ferry to Shishkin as well. Shishkin is a 12-hole golf course. When it comes to lodging on the West Coast, there's a few different options, but Marine Lawn just recently did a renovation to Marine Troon, which is literally pretty much on the 18th hole of Royal Troon. It's right there. I stayed there last October. It's a fantastic hotel and lodging option that again is again walking distance to the first tee to Royal Troon. They also most of the Marine Lawn hotels have a chipping green and putting green outside the hotel, so you can chip and putt pretty much right on the 18th fairway, which is really great. So looking forward to Royal Troon next year, DJ. It's gonna be a great Open.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, and I don't know how they live up to the last one. I mean, you're right. That finish in 2016, Phil might have shot 64 or 65 himself.
Yeah.
And, I'm pretty sure that he would have won like every other Open in history, except for that one. They just ran away with it. So it's going to be fun to have it back there. Like you said, there's just something about the Open when it's in Scotland. No disrespect to our friends in England, but it just hits different. And Royal
Mhm.
Troon is always a great host. And like you said, it's an awesome destination. Take the helicopter over to Machrihanish, and you've got a week's worth of awesome golf. But we jump ahead from there to Royal Portrush in 2025, and obviously this is I don't want to say a surprise, but for it to be coming back so quickly after their
Mm.
Open in 2019 is really a testament to just how great that Open was and how great of a job the course did in its hosting duties. The Open had not been to Royal Portrush in almost 70 years, and they just put on an absolute show. But unlike, say, Hoylake, where we just were, Portrush has plenty of standout holes that that do kind of easily find their way into the memory bank. Number 5 is always one of them. White rocks, the green backs up to the beach, have this great panorama. Of course, the view up to the cliffs. The new 7th is an awesome par 5. You've got to stay out of the wee Nelly bunker that they built there. And then, of course, you get out to 15 and 16, 16 being Calamity Corner, one of the hardest par threes that you'll ever encounter, especially like you've said with the railway. If you've got anything working left to right, Calamity is going to could make a mess of your card because there's a huge valley short and right. You do not want to be down there. Like Royal Troon, obviously this area, is a very popular destination for golf travelers, mostly because those who are coming to this region, they want to try to pair Royal Portrush with Royal County Down. And these are the two most sought after tee times in Ireland, really two of the most sought after tee times in all of golf. And, so much so that we did an entire episode about just those two courses. So go back, have a listen. But you take those two and you pair them with Port Stewart and Ardglass and Castle Rock and even out to Ballyliffin, where they've got two great courses. And again, you've got an awesome week. If you base yourself in Belfast, you never have to change hotels. Most will opt to do one change and either, stay once down near Royal County Down and then move to somewhere closer to Portrush. But plenty of great options. And with the Open coming back, there's at least 3 hotels that I'm aware of that are set to come online before the Open returns. You touched on it with Royal Troon. the thing that we have to mention is that with the Open coming back that year, we are already planning for 2025 for many travelers, especially for these 2 courses. The challenge that you're gonna run into is that Royal Portrush is going to be closed for at least a month before the Open. Really, this applies to all of these courses that we're talking about today. It's gonna be closed a month beforehand, and then if history is a guide, leading up to the Open, everyone played off of mats. So, if you're saying, "Alright, I wanna play Portrush and County Down," well, next year is probably out already. And then 2025 may not be your right choice unless you go after the Open. And even then, pickings are going to be slim because everybody's going to be going within this concentrated time. So you might need to look at 2026. That's just kind of the overall thought there. But speaking of 2026, we're coming right back to England's Gulf Coast, and we talked about this one in the last podcast. But Connor, take us to Birkdale.
Yeah, it was kind of fun just following the Open this past week, because a lot of the media, they obviously follow the golf, but because in GB and I, especially in the summer, you can get some sunsets that, 10 or a little past that PM. So it was fun seeing some of the people play the other golf courses in and around the area, and Birkdale specifically, and it looked fantastic. But yeah, the Open will be there in 2026, and again, it's the Wedding Cake Clubhouse that we kind of talked about, kind of what it looks like, very Art Deco-y. Looks different from the other ones, and then around this area. But I mean, it will be, with England's Gulf Coast specifically, with Hoylake and Birkdale. I mean, 2 Opens within 3 years, or so. I mean, that is fantastic. It just drives back the strength of this area with 3 Royals, as well as the other just great second tier, English golf courses in and around this area. So, again, huge benefit playing 2 open roto courses. I'm sorry, 3 open roto courses on this trip, and specifically 2 that were in the last 3 years or so. I'd say the kind of the last thing about just Birkdale and just this area in general, and we mentioned it a few times back in the past episode too, is just with this area, you never have to change hotels. So, and we did a deep dive in the Southwest Ireland area, and you have to change sometimes hotels two and three times. And with the England's Gulf Coast, you just stay in one hotel for your whole trip. So there's a huge benefit to that. And one of the largest benefits, other than the great golf, is just being able to stay in one hotel. So that is Royal Birkdale. Looking forward to the next few Opens, DJ.
Well, and on that topic, that inevitably leads to, well, where does it go after 2026? It's interesting to see the difference in how the RNA approaches the Open versus the USGA and the US Open. The USGA has like the next 12 US Opens etched on the calendar, and they have something like 75 or 80% of all future Opens out to like 2050 on the calendar already. I'm gonna be like 75 years old with some of these Opens, and you take that though and you contrast it to the RNA, where at most it's 3 or 4 years out as they plan this. I mean, Olympic cities only get picked usually 7 years out. So the
Yeah.
USGA is way ahead of the curve on the schedule thing. But if you were to speculate about where it goes from here, from 2027 onward, the easy choice for that year in particular would have to be the old course. If the RNA sticks to their every 5-year rotation with St. Andrews, it would be due in that year. It certainly makes sense from a business standpoint when you figure that the 2022 Open was the most attended in history. This year at Hoylake was number 2. And if you look at the next few slots, it's St. Andrews in 2000, Portrush in 2019, St. Andrews in 2015, and Birkdale in 2017. And so
Mm.
it makes, it paints a clear picture as to why these courses are next in the queue. If you remove that from the equation and say what course deserves it, Muirfield has to be the choice. I mean,
Mm.
to me anyway, it will have been 14 years since Phil's win there. Some of the best in the game have won at Muirfield. They wrote the original rules of golf. I mean, Muirfield needs the Open. And
Mhm.
so that would be, I think, my preference. We'll see. Connor, where would you like to see it go?
Yeah, so I mean, both those are great options. When I was playing over when I was across the pond in October, I was playing Carnoustie, and my caddy mentioned that there's hearsay that the Open would be back, and there was actually talk it was going to be 2026. So don't don't take this too seriously, but they did mention that they're doing some renovations on the hotel that's right off the Carnoustie there, in hopes of getting it open in the future. So I could see it there, but I agree with you with Scotland for sure for 2027. It would just make sense. So I think one of those two options or three. I think that's pretty fair.
Well, it will certainly be interesting to see. I guess we probably won't find out until this time next year, given that Royal Birkdale was just announced here a couple of weeks ago. So we'll see where they take it. Maybe they've got a surprise up their sleeves for all of us. But Connor, this has been a treat. Great to be back, and always good to talk the Open Championship. Anything to add before we sign her off?
Well, I think the last thing we need to talk about, we had on the last podcast, we talked about who we thought was going to win
Oh no,
the Open. What were yours again, DJ? I can't remember.
pretty
Um,
sure I said Rory was what my heart said, and
yeah,
Ricky was my pick.
yeah, okay, yeah. I said Scheffler or Rom. I was close with Rom. I was
Yeah,
close with Rom, but uh, I don't think I don't know what the betting odds were for Brian Harmon to win, but where's
170 to 1.
really?
170 to 1 was the number that I saw. And you're right. Rom was you got the closest, I think, of all of us. And come Sunday, it was like every time you thought that he was going to let somebody back in, whether it was Rom or Cam Young.
Hmm.
Number 5 was a perfect example. I think it was he hit his drive in the gorse bush. You thought,
Yep.
okay, lead was already down to 3, I think, at that
Hmm.
point. But what did he do? He blasts a hybrid up short of the green, gets up and down for a ho hum par, and then I think he birdied the next hole.
Yep.
So door closed. And
Yep.
so our picks were not stellar. They weren't bad. I mean,
Correct.
Rory, Rick wasn't great, I guess. Rory was okay. Rory was just Rory.
Mm.
But Rom was probably the closest, I would say, of
Yep.
of the batch. So, but a lot of fun. Look forward to revisiting those picks again next year at Royal Troon. But in the meantime, we're going to include some of what we talked about today in the show notes. But as always, if you have any questions, DM us on social media or send us an email, golf@haversham.com. But otherwise, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back again soon with another episode. But until then, we wish you plenty of golf at its finest and life at its best.